Good morning. Start off as what Jared said. My verse that I really love and kind of where God has led us to is Joshua 23:14. And it says, "Now I am about to go the way of all the earth. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled. Not one has failed." I just love God's faithfulness in this, and that God's truth and God's promises in our lives always are going to come true, always are being fulfilled. Joshua is about to die, and here in the verse we can see it's not anything new to anyone. He says, now I'm about to go the way of the earth. Right? I'm there. I know this is coming. I'm at the end. I am older. I've gone through so much of life up into this journey, and I feel that God's been faithful, and now I am about to go. I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to pass this on. And it tells us here, it says, but before I go, he says, right, there's these promises. Right, I want you to know something. Before I go, I need to convey something to you. I need to share something to you. And I need to speak something into your life from God. And he gathers all of his leaders at this time, right, together. And he says, I want you to remember who God is. Right, as a nation, they came out of the Exodus. Right, they were slaves for years and years and years. And God led them out of the Exodus. Right, he even to the point where he blessed the nation so much that it tells us in Scripture that they robbed the Egyptians of all of their gold and jewels, that God blessed them so much that the Egyptians gave these things to them to start their nation. And then we see them, they wander through the desert after their sin, after their doubt. When they get to the edge of the promised land, Joshua, Caleb, they go in. They're the 2 of the 12 that bring back a great report, and they're right there on the edge, and everybody else says, no, we can't. They're just too big, too strong. And they're pushing. And God then says, you know what, we're gonna have you wander. But I'm going to provide for you in this. Right? I'm not going to leave you. My promises that I will be there for you are going to continue. And God led them through that, and he brings them also then into the promised land where they had years of wars. 32 wars, 31 kings defeated, and yet God was still there, still fulfilling his promise that he would give him this land, that he would lead them to it, that he would take them to this point. And these victories were of such a nature that they knew God was leading and God was faithful. Right? They were such victories that you had to turn your eyes to the Lord. Right? Why would you think that marching around a city would allow it to fall? Right? It's not what happens. I've walked around this place a bunch of times just praying and talking. It's still standing, so it was never my intention to make it fall, but you know. Right, but God was faithful, and his promises were true. And this is a new chapter for the nation of Israel that we're coming to this point, right? Moses has already gone, and Joshua is about to go, and he says, I need you to remember this. Right? God's promises are here for you. God has fulfilled them along this way, along this journey that was crazy, that we would have not taken, that we didn't want to take. Right? As Jared said, we got to the edge of the Red Sea and they started to complain. Right? We just might as well go back. They fed us. The job of conquering the promised land was over, and it tells us in the verse that now they get to rest. In verse 1 of this chapter, it says, and they get to rest. My family's been on a journey for 4 years now, and this is a verse that stuck out about halfway through these 4 years. We adopted our son Luke on November 20th this past year of 2020 after a 4-year journey, and we're just thankful for God's promises. We have some highs and lows through that journey. Right? Sometimes we're, all right, God, we see you working so much, and then something comes and it's like, all right, God, I know you're there, but I don't see how this is going to end this way. And halfway through these 4 years, I truly believe that the Lord gave this verse to my wife for us. This was posted above my kitchen sink one day when I came home. I was doing dishes, cleaning up, helping, and this verse was on a little note card posted there, surrounded by other verses, as my wife has started to do, is just posting verses all over the house, just as reminders of who God is. And I read this, and I was like, oh, that's a good one. And then every time I continued to read it as I went back, and just knowing after that, talking to my wife and just hearing how God gave this to her, this promise that Luke would be ours, this promise that he gave us that he was at the end of this, no matter how long this is going to take, whether this is going to be 4 years, 5 years, whether it's going to be another 3 months, we knew that he was going to be ours. We felt this from the Spirit that the Lord said, my promises never fail. And I am promising this to you. And we held on to that verse through our adoption. We held on to that verse as we got good news, as we got some bad news, as it was a good time or as it was a bad time. And our family held on to this. We knew that promises of God come true. We know that he is faithful in our journey. And he desires to be faithful in others. And as we've gone through ups and downs, as I said, we knew. And every time we met with our social work and she said, do you have any questions? Do you have anything? We said, no. Right? We know where this is ending. And we were able to share with her here and there that this is where we feel God leading us. This is where God is taking us, his faithfulness. Now, if we jump back to Joshua, right, God's promises have been fulfilled for the nation of Israel. Right, the promise that they now have the promised land and they're now having a time of rest, but this doesn't mean slacking off. This doesn't mean relaxing on our faithfulness. Right? We have Luke in our lives, but this doesn't mean that God is not still at work. This doesn't mean that I get to slack off and say, all right, God, your promises are done. They came true for us. No more. Right? This is where I continue to step in that faith. This is where Israel, the nation, continued and needed to go. And that's what Joshua is saying here. He's saying, I'm not going to be here. I'm going away. But you need to know of the promises. You need to remember the faithfulness of God. You need to be continually faithful to what the Lord is going to do now in your nation. I'm not here anymore to continue to bring this back. Moses isn't here anymore to continue to bring us back to this point. But we need your faithfulness to be true. We need your faithfulness. And God desires that. In each of our lives, God desires us to remember the promises that he has for us. To remember what he did before us. Remember that his promises never fail. That they will always come to pass. And we've seen this in ministry. We've seen this in our church recently. As we've opened back up, we just see God's promises and his faithfulness bringing back. We see the children's ministry continue to grow right now, where we're maxed out on space in our pre-K class, which we are so thankful and blessed that this week God raised up 8 volunteers out of nowhere just to come and serve. And we are blessed as we continue to see his faithfulness. And I want to leave us with the fact or the thought that God is still active in the world. God is still having promises for our lives. He desires us to continue to be faithful to him, continue to go to him, continue to focus on him, continue to spend time with him, and remember that his promises never fail.